everybody back in. So, Tim Wright is going to present. Unfortunately, I don't have much I didn't know your title, so.
I have no title.
Planning and executing a red team.
Just finished the deck of knowledge, right?
Yeah. It probably did.
Thanks a lot. It was like 3 hours ago. Give me credit, okay?
Okay, so, again, I just need to drive over so you have it ready. So Tim's going to present, and after he's done, we're going to do the final raffle of the Proximox machine. So make sure that you check with Sarah, so your name's in the drawing for that. And then I'm going to have some closing remarks, and then we'll do the sign if people want CPE, CEUs, whatever you want to call them for your certification. If you guys need them, we'll give you, what did we say it was? 5? 6? 6. So you get 60 CPE, CEUs for your service. So, and then we'll do that. So, and then we'll everybody going? Have one? And then and this is going to be, so Adrian is recording, if you haven't noticed up here. And so it will be available online and a future date. Those kind of
No, online. Everything with diddles.
I don't know what to say about that, but so they'll be online at Iron Geek.
Iron Geek, and also you can just go to YouTube and look for Iron Geek, and I have the most recent post all OISF.
So there you go. He's already beat us to it. He's already online. So you guys are streaming out in the Wild Wild West. So. Anyways, Tim.
Thanks, sir. Ready, Adrian? Right on. Hello, everyone. My name's Tim Wright. Is everybody having a good conference so far? I love this conference. How many years has it been? 12 years, right? So I remember those early days before we had Ohio Information Security. For those of you that may not have been here, we used to meet at pizza places, TGI Fridays up by the Dayton Mall, and it would just be literally a bunch of us sitting around drinking beer and looking at laptop screens and looking at Daryl's research on format strings and talking about how to get shells. And we were like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a place we could set up and do this every month, and we didn't have to, bother these waitresses and not tip them properly because they'd get really irritated at us. And so Daryl and a couple other folks got together and got this group together. And so 12 years is an amazing accomplishment. And I went back before I came here this morning, and I looked back at some of my early talks, and I was just like, oh my God, these are bad. So I have learned a ton just by coming here and watching other people present, and I've gained a lot of knowledge. And so for those of you that don't present or feel intimidated about coming up in front of a room of your peers, you shouldn't. You should try. Because what that allows you to do is you can focus on something. It allows you to hone that skill, learn something, share with your peers. Nobody's going to boo you unless it's me, and then Daryl will boo you. But other than that, it's a good way to get out and support your local community. So I highly encourage everyone to come out and present. Support this group. 12 years is amazing. Happy birthday. And with that, I'm going to give my talk. So planning and executing red team engagements. So this is my bio. 21 years within the information security field. Right now, I am the team lead for the red team in American Electric Power. I've been there for 5 years. And a lot of what we do is everything from standard smash and grab style pen tests, more of our advanced red team engagements. We can do wireless, a lot of hardware reverse engineering, because we have a lot of embedded systems that we'll test. Prior to that, I worked for DHS US CERT on their red team, and I learned a ton from those guys. And then previous to that, I was over at the research labs doing work for DoD. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a respect slide right off the bat, because there are a ton of red teams out there that do this work well. I don't have Rapid's group up here, but there's a long list. Lars, Spectre, Fusion X, Trusted Sec, Raphael, who now is over at Spectre. All of these teams do this stuff very, very well, and they publish tons of papers. They talk about this all the time. They share. So the goal here is to understand our adversaries. We've seen some talks today about trying to slow down the adversary's movement within our infrastructures, detect that adversary attack before they can actually get in or compromise your infrastructure. So, mad respect for all these groups. Go Google these guys, look at their talks, look at their presentations. With Black Hat and DEF CON all coming up within the next month, there's going to be some really great talks coming up. So, where this concept started was, I like war games. I like playing war games, video games, stuff like that. And I've done it since I was a kid. And so, everything from maybe reenacting a Civil War battle to hypothetical aliens invading the planet, right? They make games for it. And so sitting around playing games with my friends is kind of fun, but I can't do that at work. But I also look at wargaming and security as well. If you are former military, and I think there's a lot of former military folks here, or current military, DoD looks at wargaming as a way for us to train, right? So you have Red Team, Red Flag, Top Gun, not trying to sell Tom Cruise, but that's a cool movie, right? But all of that is stuff that we can leverage within security to learn and train. And so when I think of war games from my background, some stuff like the old chit games, where the little cardboard chits, all the way to the miniatures where you sit and paint them, to playing online computer games now, right? So you have team versus team, capture the flag style of events. This is all cool and this is fun, but then when we think of cyber war gaming, right? So now we see CTF style events, right? So we have DerbyCon, we have, this is DEF CON, the big CTF out of DEF CON. If you've never been, it's a great event to hit. All the way down to SANS Net Wars, right? All of these events are great ways for people to learn pen testing, red teaming skills, blue teaming skills, because they put it all in, right? So these are super fun too if you ever get a chance to do these. Take a lot of caffeine. So I started thinking about all this. I'm like, okay, so let me kind of define the engagement real quick too, because I think when we talk about this space, pen testing, red teaming, threat emulation, the terms get kind of blurred, right? So pen testing, I'm going to call that, I call it more of like a smash and grab. So team's going to go in, they're going to assess an infrastructure, an application, maybe one system. They're going to look for a vulnerability. They're going to try to exploit that. They're going to elevate their rights, and they're going to win, right? That's it, game over. And those can be valuable. Red team engagement, you're going to see more goals. And now we're starting to see pen testing pick up some of that as well, right? So the pen testing teams are starting to bake goals into their rules of engagement. Red team is going to have a lot more of that. So it's going to be goal-oriented, more broad scope, where we're not going to narrow the red team down to specific things. We're going to let them run, right? We want them to think outside the box. The goal here is they want to emulate an adversary of some type. They're going to assess your readiness, your maturity of your infrastructure, right? This is going to run over a long period of time. This is not going to be a week-long engagement. This could be months. And then some of the things I'm going to be talking about is what we call threat scenarios. This is going to be a more focused blend of the two, pen testing and red teaming. It can run over a shorter period of time using a smaller team. And again, you're going to define your objectives and your goals so you can have a more narrow target range, but you can simulate a specific scenario if you wish. There we go. So again, some terminology. I'm not going to read through all this because I have a lot of slides, but red team, blue team, white team, purple team. Everyone should be fairly familiar with those. TTPs, that's how our threat actors operate, right? So once they breach, once they land on your infrastructure, what are they doing? Are they running PowerShell? What kind of rats are they using? Is there specific things that they're going to do to maintain persistence, how they set up their C2 channels? IOCs, so these are the artifacts that are going to be left over after there's a compromise on the infrastructure. So your malware guys, your blue team folks, this could be your hashes, this could be a specific binary, specific log files that are being written to Windows or Linux, things like that. These are IOCs, and you're going to want to have an understanding of that, so you'll be able to work with your blue team on this as well. ROE, this is my generic term. It could be statement of work, rules of engagement, whatever you call it. This is the outline of what you're going to do, okay? And then white card, this is what we're calling an assumed breach scenario, and I'll get to more of that here in a second. So let's get into red teaming. Right, let's talk about what we're looking at. So we have technology, we have physical, and we have people, right? So when we're looking at this space from a security perspective, right, we're looking at all of this stuff. Daryl talks about the tech, right? We talk about the social engineering aspect, that's our people. We have physical, so our buildings, our badges, and that could be technical too. But really, when we start looking at red teaming, there's going to be a convergence, and we're going to be sitting right in the middle, so we could have a play in all those areas. Okay, so those are kind of high-level definition. Traditional pen test, again, more of our short-term engagement, smash and grab. We can have goals, but again, that's going to be our vulnerabilities. We're going to look at that vulnerability data. Maybe your pen testing team's going to ask for Nexpo scans. They're going to come in and run their own, right? For an organization that's not doing this type of testing, pen testing can be very beneficial because you can come in and actually open some eyes. If you just started doing vulnerability scans, vulnerability assessments, people say, hey, I'm patching. We got this. You bring your pen testing team in, they do an assessment for you, and you go, well, you thought you were patching, and all of your systems are saying those patches are being applied properly, but you didn't actually reboot some of these systems, and they were still vulnerable to Eternal Blue, and we exploited it, and we got DA, and that was it. And I know a lot of pen testing guys, they say that same story over and over again, okay? So this can be a very eye-opening moment for security teams that need money to do more stuff and get a board of directors to kind of pay attention to them, okay? So when you have an organization that is starting to get some maturity underneath of them and they want to start to evaluate that maturity, this is where we start to test those. We're going to be looking at those adversaries that are more advanced. Maybe we're not so much worried about bots and skitties. Maybe we are. But maybe the organization and the business is more concerned about targeted attacks, APT style. And so you want to assess your organization's ability to withstand that. You're going to look at your threat intelligence, what that threat intelligence profile is going to provide you to design your exercise. And it's going to probably require some more maturity from your security team. You're going to need some more testers, have those threat intelligence feeds, or at least know where to get it online, and be able to develop that work. So I got this off of Krebs, talking about maturity models for security. And it goes from block and tackle all the way up to risk-based approach. And I'm not casting any type of stones up here. I'm not trying to point fingers or anything. Really, this depends on your organization where you land. Maybe you're compliance-driven. Your business is, we need to comply with some regulation. Maybe it says we have to do some testing. Maybe you're just trying to block and tackle, right? We just need to keep everybody out. We're going to try to detect, keep them at the perimeter, and that's it. All the way up to more of a proactive risk-based approach. You need to find out where you're landing, where your organization's leadership wants to be, and that can kind of help you determine the type of assessments you can build. So what this is just a matrix that shows a generic organization that has went through a maturity model by business unit, 1 to 5, 1 being very, very low, 5 being what they say is very mature. So you have your leadership team within an organization, they go through this process. And there's tons of ways to do it. COVID has some. I mean, there's lots of different risk ranking or maturity ranking models out there. And they come back and they go, and we're good, right? We have next-gen firewalls, we got WAFs, we got all this logging capability. They're ranking their maturity levels very, very high. And that's when your security testing organization can come in and say, okay, well, we can validate that for you. So the goal behind this, and I know I've put it somewhere else on my slides, but I really like this concept. Security is really based on faith, right? We're buying a lot of boxes, we're plugging them in, and that our vendor is telling us something, this is going to do something for you, and the flashing light is flashing, and so we have this faith that things are working properly. That control is protecting us. We properly segmented the network. Our vulnerability management systems are telling us where those vulnerabilities exist on the network. So red teaming is a good way of breaking that faith-based security. You can really start to show people, are they getting the bang for their buck, right? So a lot of times when we start thinking about this, and this is kind of how I look at it, is a crawl, walk, run approach. You start crawling with pen testing. You start to walk, doing some of this basic threat emulation. You get more into your red team, your threat scenarios, and your running. But it's going to take a while to build that program. So don't try to hit the gas too fast, because you could probably spook your leadership team a little bit, okay? So, again, work with those folks, talk to them, hear what they're saying. Sometimes all you need is a win or two doing these programs, just to show the value of it. And once you get that under your belt, they'll start to see the value. So a good place to start when we're building some of this framework, when we're saying, okay, we want to try to do this, we got some pen testing, we got our vulnerability assessment processes running, we have this new infrastructure we built, we want to go in there, we want to analyze it from a red team perspective, we want to do some more advanced testing. How do I start doing that? So MITRE ATT&CK framework, great place to start. Excuse me. So they've broken down the attack phases into 11 different steps. And I'll show you those here in a second. So understanding that behavior of an adversary once they start attacking you, once they breach, once they're moving lateral, right? They're going to do data exfiltration. Some of the things we want to look for. That's a great place to get TTPs. And they have entire frameworks out here for Windows, Linux, and Mac. So if you need to test any of those systems, this is a great place where you can go out and start getting that data and start building those profiles. And so the attack phases, so we have our initial access, how are we going to land, phishing, web-based attack that allows you to come in from the internet. Sometimes we still see that too. Execution, right? So we're going to execute that attack, maintain our persistence, and we're going to privesc, right? So if I land as some low-level account like Bubba on Daryl's hardware, and then I find out, oh, I'm in sudo, and I can elevate my rights there, cool. Defense and evasion, or how am I going to get around your defenses, right? So you have firewalls, you have IDS, you have some type of AV, so I have to find ways to get around that. Credential access, discovery, lateral movement, collection of credentials and data, exfiltration, and then establishing our command and control. So this framework is a really good way to start visualizing the gaps in our infrastructure, the gaps in our security. This is also a way we can justify those spends. And so when I talk about that, so this is an example visual. This organization, and I know it's tough to read for you guys, I apologize about that. So the blue, this organization deployed some client controls, and so this test was for client controls on an infrastructure. The blue is high confidence that those are working as designed, right? They're good. The yellow is medium confidence, right? We tested them, some of the logs didn't get down into the SIM, or there was no logs at all. It was kind of hit or miss. And the orange, there's no confidence, nothing happened, right? So now I start to look at this and I'm like, okay, from our clients, because we know phishing, 85% of the time, compromises are happening from phishing attacks. So that usually means our workstations, our users. So we make sure we have some good controls around there. Looking at this graph, I can start to visualize, we may have some gaps here. We may need to really address some of this. We're not doing as good of a job as we thought, right? So we've had faith that our tools were doing what they needed to do. So we can start to prioritize what we need to do precisely in this environment. And again, this is at the top, each column represents one of the phases of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So from the initial attack all the way to establishing the C2 channel. So you can see the command and control channel, we're getting very little here. We're really not doing a good job here to see that there's a C2 channel set up. But maybe over here in the performance, I think it's performance, so I apologize. We're doing a lot better. So maybe our spend is we need to start doing more detection of that C2 channel being established outbound. Or discovery, which this is the discovery, right? We're not getting a whole lot there either. So start thinking about threat intelligence and looking for threat intelligence on how this works. And I know I'm constantly looking at some of these threat intelligence feeds and stuff that's coming out, but it's like, I need to understand how these adversaries are working. I want to know what they're doing, how they're executing it, so I can build an assessment, a test, to test if there's a specific adversary, some specific technique, are my company's tools detecting that? Can we alarm properly? Can the SOC detect it? Can they respond? I view my team and what we do as a way to support the blue team. We're not adversary, okay? We're here to help you guys. So you can leverage that and leverage the capabilities there, and we can both improve, or we can have that adversarial relationship. I tend to like the let's work together. But the threat intelligence, this is what we need to understand to build these programs. And so again, TTPs, we hear a lot about nation state, but what exactly does that mean, right? So we can really start to drill down and customize our engagements based on what we want to look at. So I have an example in here of APT 29. So this is Cozy Bear and the Dukes. And again, I apologize, you guys can't see that too well, but some of the things, and this is right off of MITRE's website. So if you go out to MITRE, you can start to go through the groups, and all of these threat actors are there, okay? Some of the things that we point out and they show in here, so this is a Russian actor. Some of the things we're looking at here, they use PowerShell. So the first line there is talking about how they use PowerShell for post-exploitation. Another thing they're going to look at, or they're doing, is software packing. So they're using a UPX packer. So as a red team, some of the things we want to start trying to look at is what can I do to simulate this adversary on the infrastructure? I'm not going to be able to send them an email and say, hey, guys, can you send me your malware kits so I can run a simulation on the internal? And they probably would, but I don't know necessarily if I'd want to run those on any of my machines. So other stuff here, they got WMI listed that they use. They're using pass the hash techniques. They're going to use the bypass UAC, right? Some of the things, again, as pen testers, we're going to do automatically to try to get creds. We're going to try to go in there and own the infrastructure. But as a red team, we want to simulate this as well. So when we start looking at the software for APT 29 that they're using, some things that start to pop out, they're using Tor. They're using Posh Spy, which if you look at Posh Spy is just a fileless WMI rootkit, right? They're using Mimikatz, PS Exec, and then they're using all of these different Gemini Duke, Cloud Duke, Cosmic Duke. Those are all just various malware kits that they're using to maintain or gain access into their system. So when we start looking at this, as I'm starting to think about, okay, I want to build a simulation for these guys, I can do that. We got Mimikatz, I got PowerShell. This is something we can actually build. So I could build a simulation for this, and looking at maybe some of these rootkits, I could probably design one for those too. So once we have our TTPs, we can set up our test playbook, right? What are the testers going to do when they're running? Again, PS Exec, we're going to execute commands against WMI, Mimikatz. One thing to understand here while we're doing this testing is your blue team, if we're not cluing them in that we're doing this, they're going to think that they're being attacked. So they're going to start responding. So you need to be prepared to have somebody who can think on their feet pretty quick and have everything just start to fall apart. C2 channels are getting pinched quick. Payloads are getting popped. They got a really good reverser sitting there. They're starting to figure out what's going on. You're getting burned down. So be prepared to do a little improvisation. Just make sure that that improv maps to the adversary. Don't go too crazy. You can also build noise into your simulation if the other side happens, where you're there 3 weeks and nobody saw nothing, and you're done, and it's like, okay, let's start turning up the noise a little bit so maybe we can try to get somebody's attention to let them know that we're here. So for this example, again, looking at APT 29, we wanted to, this sample company wants to run a simulation against their IR team capabilities. AP 29 is the example. The company believes that some of these Russian threat actors would probably target them. They've seen traffic coming from Russian IPs, so we want to make sure we're on our game. Okay, cool. We can do that. So we're going to send a few staged phishing emails So we have some people inside. We're going to send them some emails. They're going to click it. Right? We're going to get some shells. That's our white card. And then we're going to do a 4-phase test. The first 2 phases are going to focus on simulating the threat actor over several weeks. And then the last phase, we're going to start ramping up our noise. If we don't get detected. And then finally, if we get everything done, we'll wrap up with a purple team engagement where we'll sit down with our blue team and walk through what we did, show them our logs, and hopefully help them improve their maturity. So this is our scenario outline. So you can put this in a spreadsheet. You can put it in a Word document, whatever you want to do. And you can see again. So phase 1, this will be our first week. So we're going to have our staged phishing. We have our times outlined. We'll have our users in here who are going to be part of that campaign. So we'll either work with our legal or security teams, whoever, to say we got 5 people randomly. They know what's going to happen. They have been sworn to secrecy. They're not going to talk about it. During that first week, we're going to run Mimikatz via PowerShell. We're going to establish some persistence. We're going to bypass UAC. We're going to do a domain enumeration with PowerShell, right? That's our playbook. That's all we want to do, low and slow, right? We're not pen testing. So our C2 jitter here could be set up to be 8 hours. So you have maybe a few commands you're going to run every day as you're doing this exercise. It could come up a little bit too, depending on what you want to do. Then second week, second phase, we're going to try to elevate our rights. Maybe we've already done it here. Maybe we ran Mimikatz. We were just like, wow, we got DA right off the bat. So phase 2 is done. But maybe not. So we'll try to get DA. We'll start lateral movement. And we're going to start hunting users, right? So adversaries, when they get in your network, they want the power users. So you're going to start getting hunted in your own network, right? So this is where the war game starts to happen, right? Your blue team is looking for the adversaries, but the adversaries are looking for you. Because all that data is online. It's all in your domain controller. So I'm going to start querying those groups to find out who the users are that have the elevated rights are going to let me do what I want to do on the network. So week 3, we're going to start exfilling data, and we're going to start ramping up the noise. So if the blue team hasn't caught us yet, now we're going to start ramping up some things. We're going to start port scanning. We're going to start, maybe that noise is, I'm going to create another domain admin account. That should get somebody's attention on the network immediately if I create a domain admin account. You would hope, right? So yeah, amplified noise of attack. We'll create the new DA. We'll kick off admins via RDP. All that fun stuff. We'll run some death metal through their machines down in the SOC and wake them up. And then finally, once they are notified or figuring out that something's going on, then we'll move into our purple phase. So we'll do cleanup, and that's very important. So for the red team guys in the audience, I'm going to talk about this here in a second. We're going to make sure we have all of our data, our logs, get all of our hashes, and kind of ramp down and then start working with our blue team. So as we're doing this, this is an example log from a spreadsheet. User hunting via PowerShell. So once the adversary actually gets in the infrastructure, so one thing like, did the IOC create a log? So we're looking at your Windows boxes at that point. So, okay, this was the targets that I hit. So the red team's going to have a spreadsheet of all the boxes that they went after, or it's in Cobalt Strike. This is the time I did this. Did that machine log that I was querying the domain for users? Yes or no? In this case, no, right? So logs were created. Was the IOC parsed to the SIM? Did it actually get where it was supposed to so somebody could see it? Yes or no? In this case, no. So this was a bad day for the blue team, right? None of this stuff worked the way it was supposed to. And then the red team read PowerSploit on the network, hunting users with local admin rights on machines or who have DA rights on the network level. So that was kind of the outline of what they were doing. But this is the report that we'll do for every one of these events, right? So that was, wow, that's rough. So that's event 2.1. So that maps right to user hunting via PowerSploit, right? So we can see that this was week 2. This was the event we did. This was the feedback, and then we provide the data to the blue team. So at that point, the blue team's like, wow, That was awesome. Those guys were moving around. We didn't see it. So now they can start going in and figuring out why things weren't firing. Again, we're looking at that faith-based model, right? The red team's coming in and we're saying, what are you doing? And kind of challenging that faith of the security. This is really where your red team and blue team really start to gel and work together, right? Getting over that adversarial relationship. Blue team, a lot of time these guys sit in a SOC in the sim. They don't get to do stuff. They don't get to go to cool conferences or staring at a screen all day. This is a chance for them to exercise their tools and capabilities within their infrastructure with what they have in front of them. Your red team gets to exercise. They get to improve. So for those of you looking for justification, it could be, we just need to do some internal training, right? So we also have that groupthink mindset. And that groupthink, I hear it all the time. Hey, we don't have to worry because we got firewalls, so we're good. No, Mr. Peter. No, you're not. Because everyone gets into this mindset in security that we have some widget, something that's happening, it's protecting our infrastructure. It could be AV, could be a WAF, it could be some technology, but it's not really set up properly. Some things weren't configured correctly, and we don't determine that until we test it. So, red teaming is really cool, but there's some downsides. And again, it can take a lot of time and resources to execute these. So if you have smaller teams that are doing a lot of their assessments, this could be challenging. This could be very challenging to do. And so for the ROE for these red team engagements, it's going to be a really broad assessment. It could say, we're going to test this across the entire infrastructure, right? So that's a lot of stuff to test in a couple of months, and everything else stops. But what we can do, so again, coming back to, so wargaming and red teaming, and I kept thinking about this, like so I love doing these red team engagements because they're really fun, but I need to narrow the scope. And I started thinking about it more, and I was looking at stuff online. So Intel had some papers published about how they were running war games to test security controls. Of course, I talked about DoD, and they do all of this stuff. But again, having limited resources and time, which all of us have, I was trying to come up with a way to do this. And so I love to read. This is a book that they hand out at the Naval Academy. And it's Fundamentals of Wargaming. It's a really good book. And I was looking for some ideas for testing in SCADA environments, because when you're in a critical control environment, you just can't walk in and start firing up Nmap scans or doing some of this stuff with power exploit or anything like that, because some things in that environment do not react well to packets. And they can brick very easily, so we have to be very cautious. And so as I was doing some searching online, Raphael Mudge had a blog post on adversary simulation, and that was my answer. I started reading that, and I was like, this is the ticket. So that's where I came up with the idea for threat scenarios for doing this type of test. And so when I look at a threat scenario, again, we're really looking at the post-compromise actions. We know at some point a threat actor is going to get into your environment. Nobody here can say that they are going to be 100% secure. It's just not going to happen. So I'm not really concerned about that phase. I'm more looking at how long can they linger? How long can they maintain persistence on the infrastructure before we detect them? And so we're looking at this as a white box assessment, since we're really looking under the hood, so to speak, of the infrastructure, looking at those controls. The tradecraft is important here too. So we're going to look at our threat intel, understand what our adversaries can do, and build that into our scenario. So we're going to do an assume breach, is what we call it. So we're going to white card our access, so we're going to build our beacon payload, whatever it is. We're going to put it on a machine. We're going to run it. Just give me access. So, sorry about that. I'm kind of coughing. So what we want to look at, again, is when we're looking at our threat model, we're trying to build this scenario, is if we have users who have internet access, email, they're pulling things down. We have developers that go out and they're pulling files down, they're running them on their machines, they have elevated local rights. Those are all things when we look at security, they're bad. And we build that into our threat model. So when we say, hey, we want to test this environment, we know the user can get to the internet, we'll assume they pull down malware, we'll run it on the machine as the user, And then at that point, we'll start our scenario, right? So it's much safer, especially when we start looking at some of these SCADA control environments. We just put a payload and go. So where you have to be careful here is not to get gamed by the blue team, because it will happen, because I'm speaking from some experience here. So you got to make sure when you're telling them what you need, this is the context of the user. So, hey, the people that are working in this space, can you create us an account just like their account and give us a machine just like the machine that they're running in that space, and then we can go from there, because they may just hand you a box that's got all of these security controls and all this stuff locked into it, and the account is kind of gamed, and it's like, wow, these guys are really secured, man. They're really doing a good job. It's like, no, you kind of got gamed a little bit on that one. So if you think you're getting gamed, you can call shenanigans and say, hey, can you put this payload on another machine just to kind of compare? I might be missing something. And then when they do that, then it's like, it's an aha moment. So be careful with that. So again, it's going to be more narrow scoped. Nice for control environments. We will whitelist some of the stuff in there to make sure, or blacklist, excuse me. We're going to put stuff out of scope for our testing. Especially some of the PLCs, things like that are more sensitive. We can look at those on the bench, have Daryl rip them apart, rip the firmware apart. So we'll understand those more in that context. Again, looking at the environmental controls and looking at this as a war game, right? So we're going to run this specific scenario and see what happens, see if the blue team can see us. So there's a lot of different ways we can run this, from paper to a full live assessment. So the tabletop exercise, while it's okay, I like a hybrid approach more of mixing a paper exercise, doing your threat models, and then maybe getting in that environment and doing it, because I don't think the paper exercise is really going to give you everything that you're going to want. Sometimes people will make some assumptions and not know just completely. So I talked to some people about this, and I'm like, hey, this is just red teaming, man. You're just doing it with a more narrow scope. Well, yes and no. So again, you are evaluating the maturity of a specific environment, and you're going to use those reports and provide it to senior leadership and let them know where they're at. But this is more of a specific control, a specific system. So you can do it much quicker, have a better turnaround time, show your ROI for that program, and then provide the blue team with their IOC supporting data, right? So how do we set this up? So this is Cobalt Strike. There's a lot of what my team uses when we're doing this. Matter of fact, this is what my team uses. And I don't know, does anybody in here use this besides me? Anybody here mess around with Cobalt Strike? A little bit? Okay. This is a great product. Raphael does really great work here. So how do you do it? Again, if you have a specific network you want to test, you write up your goals. You can outline them carefully, make sure that they're measurable, right? So here's an example scenario that I wrote just for this. So, and again, I'll kind of save the time, but bypassing two-factor auth, we want to test some, look for SCADA login traffic for a specific subnet, try to gain elevated rights on a control server, get elevated rights on that subnet. So we define those, right? So now I can measure those when the testing's done. Hey, were we able to do this? Yep, we got DA in that infrastructure. Okay, cool. So first off, again, leveraging Cobalt Strike. Get a copy legally. Help out the author. It's not super expensive. I think it's about $3,500 for the software. It's an adversary simulation framework for red team operations. Okay. The coolest thing about this is beacon. So we have a beacon payload that we can set up. And we can use various protocols for our C2 channels, right? So we can use DNS, we can use HTTP, HTTPS, we can use redirectors online, which I'll show you here in a second how we can do. You can set up multiple redirectors, so you can actually simulate an adversary online talking with multiple IPs, so they can have like a distributed botnet talking out there. So this is a basic example of what redirectors look like. So our machine sitting here behind this firewall that's been compromised, that's now calling out, this is an interpreter, HTTPS connection, going out to redirector 1, and then we have 3 beacons going out to 3 other IPs online. So the redirectors are there because adversaries are never sourcing from their command and control server. they're always routing through different proxies, right? So you burn one of these proxies down, but he's still got 2 or 3 others online that he could roll to, right? So now we can simulate that. Here's another example of redirectors. This is from Blue Screen and Jeff, and having multiple domains set up to our redirectors and coming back to our team servers. Again, this is the same image of what we saw in the last slide, right? And so as we start to look at these infrastructures, now we can do short-term engagements over HTTP. We can do a short-term over DNS. We can do more of a long-term, long-haul DNS C2 channel, right? Or we can do phishing and payload scenarios where we have SMTP servers and Apache redirectors sitting online. Now we can really start to do some fancy stuff. Now this will require some setup, but there are some really good blog posts. If you go out to Blue Screen and Jeff's website, he has a really good blog on setting up infrastructures like this. So we have this infrastructure now, and with Beacon, we can use what's called malleable C2. And so with that malleable C2 profile, what we can do is we can start to look at what these C2 traffic, what does it look like, right? What does it look like in a packet? We can then make our C2 look like that, right? So if there's something that APT29 was using, we can get a sample of that, and we can write that in a text file very quickly, apply that to our C2 traffic so that as the blue team is seeing that C2 go out the internet through the proxy server and they're getting those proxy logs, they should be alarming on that. They should start to be like, ooh, something's going on. So malwaretrafficanalysis.net is a great place to go and get this profile data, okay? So here's an example. This is Putter Panda from Raphael's site, and I know it's tough to read, but in essence, all this is a malleable C2 profile, right? It's such a text file. And so what you can do is you can take this, set this up within Beacon, and now that Beacon payload looks like Putter Panda. So if you, again, have a specific piece of malware that you want to block and test, this is a way you can do it. So now we can reproduce malware in control space, right? So for OT guys that might be in here, if there's specific malware, black energy, something like that you want to reproduce to make sure that your OT-based detection systems are working properly, we can simulate that through those devices. We can leverage Beacon to communicate via multiple redirectors online. So we can simulate very large threat actors and simulate how our blue team responds to that. And we can do really cool post-exploitation work to make sure that our network designs are working properly and we're actually breaking that faith-based model if they're not. Now, if you don't want to use Cobalt Strike, you can actually go out and get malware. And you can run it on your infrastructure after you analyze it to make sure that you're not putting ransomware on your infrastructure. However,
What about Armitage?
so Armitage does not have all of this capability built into it. Armitage was the free software that was built that was put inside of, I think, Backtrack 5R3 and Kali.
Yeah.
So Armitage will not support Beacon.
Okay.
So Armitage is more of a nice little GUI front end where if you're learning how to do some of this stuff, this pen testing work, you can use that. But you're definitely going to want to use Cobalt Strike if you want to do more of the threat emulation. So for rats like Dark Comet, Ghost Rat, Bifrost, you can get all this stuff online. I don't recommend that. I really don't. If you do, though, put it on a machine that's isolated, run through it, make sure you're not going to do something nasty to your infrastructure. So there's a couple ways of setting up your C2 as well, and you need to think about this if you're going to set these environments up, whether you host it internal or external. And there's a lot of debates on this, but bottom line is if you have a very critical control system, host it internal. Don't put it on the internet. Keep it inside. Just use the redirectors online to get that traffic to where your box is sitting, and you're good. However, if you want to put it online, Amazon Cloud Space is out there. A lot of companies whitelist Amazon because they're doing business out there right now, so you know you're going to be able to get through that IP space. Take your time and make sure those boxes are secured. Lock them down. Put eyes on them. Make sure, don't take chances, because what you don't want to do is have your red team doing an engagement and then some adversary goes out and pops your C2 servers and they take over everything. that would be bad. So don't do that. DNS registration too. So for your C2, you're going to want to get some DNS names to set up for your phishing campaigns, right? So if you're actually going to phish people internally and you're going to go out and actually make this look legit, you're going to want to look for some DNS records, right? So there's ways that you can actually do this. A lot of blue teams, when they're looking for phishing, they're looking at the age of the DNS record. Because a lot of these malware authors are going out and they're just turning them real quick, maybe just a couple days old, and that's a red flag. But there are ways for us, for red teaming, when we're looking at more advanced adversaries, to get around some of this. So what we can do is use like expired domains. Let's go out and take a look and see what domains the company used to own or are similar to that have really good reputations, have been around for 15 years, have lots of information associated with them that don't look bad. They look legit. So we can go out to expireddomains.net and start searching. And if I were you and you're doing security work, I'd go look out here because it's amazing the domain names you can find out there that have just expired. People are like, oh, we don't need that domain anymore. They had it for 10 years. They used it for a while. They let it go. Then we red teamers come along. It's like, oh, I can get that for $8. Okay. And then I send my phishing campaign out. Everyone says, hey, that's one of our domains. That looks legit. Boom. Thanks for the shell. Appreciate it. And adversaries are doing this too. So things we can do to kind of automate this process too. Cat My Fish can actually automate that search for us. Can check for expired domains and blue coat, right? So you can actually command line some of that stuff and actually go out and really start to dig. Domain Hunter is another good one. So you can use blue coat and Web Pulse, IBM X-Force, and Cisco. It's going to look for domain age, alternate top-level domains, and it's got a really good HTML report that you can provide back to management. So again, cloud service providers, this is a good way for us to set up out in the cloud. Amazon, again, is a good choice. Or you can just have your redirectors redirect back into your internal infrastructure. So if you're wanting to just test some of your egress tools, there's some good traffic generation utilities out there as well. There's some that's built into Metasploit right off the bat. I think the email Pi generator is still there, the web Pi, the DNS Zeus. I think those are still built into the framework. If they're not, you can still get the older version of the framework and use those. Then Chris Trunter's egress assess tool is out there. You can also test capabilities to see if your company, so if you have PII or something like that, some filter out on the perimeter and you're wanting to make sure that that data is not leaving, you can run these scripts and just generate some traffic and make sure that that's not going out. And EA is great because you can simulate social security numbers, credit card numbers, and just by modifying a few lines of code, you could create your own, if you have your own types of data that you're worried about, depending on your space, that's something that you can modify nice. And PowerShell can become your friend here too, where you can create pseudo documents with metadata inside of the document and then just send those out. And we've even tested just moving an ISO. Take a 4 gig ISO and move it from one machine to someplace on the internet and see if somebody notices 4 gigs of data just walked out the door. That's an easy win. So once we have all of this, right, we're going to take this all to the blue team. We're going to hand them a ton of data. So we've done all our testing. We're now down with our blue team. Did the alerts fire? Did they respond? Did they see anything? Did the logs happen? We're going to give them all this data. The good thing is that for us on the red team side, we have a lot of capabilities where we can log this manual, but our tools can actually log it for us as well. We're going to want to make sure we include a timeline for everything we've done. There's two reasons here, okay? One, it helps them mature and improve their processes, but two, if something happens, and they try to say, well, you guys crashed something at this time, well, you can say, no, that wasn't us. We weren't even on that segment. We didn't touch it. You're going to want to log your data, however you want to do it. Manually via spreadsheet, write a little script on your box that has all the commands that are executed, however you want to do it. And so again, Cobalt Strike will generate our IOC report, and we can provide that to our blue team once we're done. This really makes some of this a lot easier for us as a blue team. So, example, we have our command and control traffic here, right? So we have, this is a specific get that's sent in and the response back. This is actually something we can hand to the blue team, and they can look at it and be like, oh yeah, we logged that, or our logs didn't even pick it up, and they can go dig into it further. We have file hashes, so all the blue teams here, when they get the hashes, they can add those right into their system immediately. And now the red team has to step up their game, right? So now they have hashes for all of our payloads. So now we have to get better. So the red team has to push. And here's our activity report. So now it's logged, it's timed, everything we did. So we had everything from dumping hashes to moving lateral on the infrastructure. This is all coming out of Cobalt Strike, and we can provide that activity report to the blue team. And when you give this type of data to those guys that work in these SOCs, they love you, right? This is great for them because now they can go in and figure out why things aren't working. They can track down, is there a problem in the tool? Maybe they didn't write their filter correctly. They made a little mistake. I mean, we're human, right? It happens. So we give them this data and they can track it down. And that's going to go a long way to helping these guys be very successful. And then again, pivot path. So we're showing them, we used SMB over 445. We were using HTTP as well to move around the infrastructure. We have our date, activities, all the stuff that we did. This is showing them exactly how we move through the infrastructure. And there's probably some pretty cool tools out there you can use to actually build some of these graphical maps based on this data. So, kind of close it up a little bit because I know we're running out of time. So APT simulations and doing red teaming engagements. This is a really great way for a team to help a company measure the maturity of that security group, okay? The goal here is not to come in and crush the blue team. We're working with you, right? That's what we want. We want to break that faith-based security model that a lot of organizations have, right? Don't have faith that that tool is working for you just how the vendor said it would. Let's make sure, right? We also want to make sure that we're adding value back to the organization. We're going to show that ROI of those tools by doing this. We're going to make sure that tool is tuned specifically for this environment because these tools are not a one fit, right? There's tweaking for each environment we have to do, and that's what we're trying to validate here is that it's working the way it needs to. Doing our threat simulations is our white box approach to performing some of this, right? We're going to narrow the scope when we do this. We're going to come in and just kind of test a few things. Maybe it's just a lateral movement from a host. We want to see if that PowerShell logging, we put PowerShell 5 on our box, we want to make sure it's working right. So this allows for more demonstrating the risk than just grabbing DA on an infrastructure. So for the pen test teams out there that, and I see it all the time, they get DA and they say, we're done. Well, no, let's add some value. Let's push it, red team, right? We're not just coming in here to smash DA. We want to show that this infrastructure has some weaknesses. Let's give them some value for the time. And finally, this is a good way for red and blue to sit down, do a cyber war game internally, train and work together, have some fun, and learn. So if this is interesting to you, here's some further reading. Applied Critical Thinking, the Cyber Exercise Playbook, the SANS Red Team Hand Guide, and then the End Games, the Hunter's Handbook. I recommend all of those to you to read further on whether it's threat hunting, red teaming, all of this stuff. There's lots of documentation online for you guys. And hopefully, we'll keep calm and we'll red team. So with that, that's my talk. Any questions, comments?
Questions?
So when you're a permanent red team company you're at, what type of buy-in do you get from executive leadership? Do what you do. Obviously, the blue team isn't knowledgeable about what you're up to all the time. How does that play out?
So you got two questions. The first is, what kind of buy-in do I have from the leadership? So we have buy-in all the way up to the board of directors for what we're doing. We've shown value. It's taken a lot of time, and we have to be careful. I know a lot of red teams want to come in and instantly hit the ground running. They want to go right to the end game, and sometimes they have to build that trust, right? And there's a lot of trust you have to build in doing this stuff. So take your time and start to show we have some competence in doing this work. Send those communication emails when you're just doing pen testing. Outbrief the blue team and let them know what's going on. And then when you find something really critical, write it up properly. Do a report, which I know we all hate to do, but do it. Brief management, and then let them take it and help them get the word up the chain. We have tons of support, right? So we're in critical control space. They're backing us 110%. The blue team, the second part of the question, it is challenging. It can be very challenging at times. But again, trying to over-communicate with those guys and let them know we're not adversarial, we're here to help you. Trying to let them know what we're doing, trying to learn from them. I spend time down with those guys. I try to go down there, and they're busy. But even a half an hour a week, they can have FaceTime with me. I can talk with them. If we find something really cool, we'll brief them on what we did, how we executed it, we share with them. There's no hiding what we're doing with the blue team, because what we're trying to do is make sure that if we find something that's critical, it's not something I'm putting in my back pocket to use over and over again against you. If we find something cool, we're going to show it to you, and we're going to give it to you. So that's the mindset that we have to have if we want to build this type of environment. We have to get over that. This is my secret sauce, and I'm not going to give it to anyone. And when we show that, you get the buy-in from the senior leadership, from the blue team. Everybody realizes we're in one group. And we still have hurdles we're working through, but it's definitely, we're in a lot better place. You can. That's in games, the Hunter's Handbook. Yes, sir.
Two things. Comment and question.
Mm-hmm.
Comment, the Able working book is actually open source and free now online, so if anyone wants to get that to the Able Academy site. Second, how often are you guys doing writing engagements? Are you doing this quarterly? Are you doing monthly?
So, that's a great question. We've shown so much value in some of these that it's now like a landslide of requests, like, can you do this here? And we need you to go here, and we need you to go do this. So it's like really happening. We're getting a lot of requests for doing. So it's not, a lot of more of what we're doing is not full scope red teaming. It's more of the threat simulation stuff. And so that way, because we have a smaller team, so we have to execute much quicker. So we'll go in and do the assumed breach, and we're doing that on everything. And we're having so much success in that space.
So can I expand on that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So with the amount of activities you guys are doing at that, are you seeing any repeat offenders that are starting to come back from some of your previous engagements that you've done?
That's a tough question. So repeat offender means, are we finding the same thing over and over again?
Repeat the question.
Sorry, so with the amount of time that they're doing red team engagements and now the amount that you guys are doing so often, are they starting to see things that they've seen months ago, that they've done on like an earlier engagement, pop up again on a later one that should have been fixed?
So for the record, what I'll say is that we try to make sure that everything we're finding is getting reported properly. There are times that you can see things. It's like, yes, this is a common occurrence on the infrastructure. So we try to make sure that we're communicating that clearly. Hey, we're seeing this over and over and over again in some spaces. Yes, there are times when we see the same thing happening, and not just in one space, but in multiple spaces. With the same internal BU when we're doing some of this, yes. Yes. It can happen. Yeah.
Kind of go back to the relationship too. So is there someone talking to leadership where they're not bringing a hammer down on the blue team with hurt your relationship?
So is there someone bringing a hammer down on the blue
No,
team?
there's someone talking to leadership to make sure they don't bring a hammer down on the blue team because what you guys are doing as the red team, that would hurt that relationship. They would be more of an adversary.
So when you find it repeatedly,
So
what you're saying is when they're found repeatedly having the same mistakes, the leadership doesn't come down on the blue team for not
So it's,
fixing that?
that's a great question. And generally what we try to do is make sure that we don't want the hammer to come down on anybody, but if there is a problem that needs to be remediated and we're not getting the leverage, and we try to work with internal teams to make sure that gets communicated properly. But you try to manage it to make sure that you're not dropping a hammer on anyone, because you don't want to shut down your program either. Because if you've gotten in and done several assessments in an environment, and you know I'm going to have to go back and do it again next year, you don't want to have an adversarial relationship with that person while you're in that space working. So you try to manage that as best as you can, but there are times when, depending on what you find, there could be some blowback. And generally what happens is it seems to hit everybody. It's like, oh, why didn't that get fixed? You guys need to go get that fixed, or you need to go do this or do that. So you manage it the best you can.
So you guys have the right to go back and follow up, so once they implemented something to make sure that it's
We do. So generally what will happen is, depending on the type of issue, we'll try to schedule a follow-up, say a year and a half later, depending on the issue. It could be, hey, we got a new firmware coming in for this system, or we got a new update. We want to test this space, so we'll go do that. We have a larger thing like this we're trying to run. We try to give them some time to do the remediation, and then we'll circle back. We'll look at the old ROE that we developed. We'll say this was the goals from that ROE. We're just going to repeat this and see where we're at. And maybe they say, hey, we added this and this too, so add these goals into the ROE as well. So we'll scope that in and then go off and execute. And then we'll see where we're at. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
Since the bad guys are using polymorphism, going from one to the other, how do you mimic that? Because it's like infinite possibilities.
It's very, very tough. So the question is polymorphism in code, depending on what the adversary is doing, whether it's in memory or using something to try to obfuscate communication channels, how are you mimicking that? And the answer is it's very difficult. There are, again, if we can get samples from threat intelligence, if there's something online that can show us maybe if there's an IOC, then we can say, okay, well, maybe part of that is they're writing some type of data here. If it's all, I mean, that's a very tough question, and it's depending on exactly what the scenario is. So hopefully there's something that I can look at and say, this seems to be how the C2 channel works, or it's a dropper, there's a registry entry here being added, something like that we can try to simulate with PowerShell or something. If not, then we just say we can't simulate that. There's no way we can do it.
But you just said a minute ago that you're going to wait for the blue team to respond, but in the real world, I don't think they're waiting. They're just going to figure it out.
And you're right. So the question is, sometimes the blue team, you're waiting for them to respond. What I'm seeing in the response is, hey, that beacon was supposed to check back in and it didn't. Can we get there from the target? Oh no, that IP is burned. Okay, roll to another IP address. So there's things that we have to do on our side while we're doing the testing to see if we can actually get the call back. And the good thing about the team server is it's sitting out there and it's going to tell you, hey, it's not talking anymore. The beacon stopped responding. I'm not getting a check-in.